Hello.
Hello.
Right, sorry
Instagram.
everyone. We were not keeping any watch on the time whatsoever. Abby says there's no sound. Abby, can you let us know whether that's still the case for you?
Okay, cool.
Okay, good. There is sound. We have sound.
Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous.
Stuff about Sherlock Holmes.
Yes. No, I'm also aware that before the thing disappeared, and therefore I can't actually look at what you said, Juniper, you were disagreeing with me about things as they appear in the text of Sherlock, which I'm absolutely prepared to, own up to varied interpretations of it, etc. I think,
but we don't have to comment anymore
so,
because Instagram ate it.
I think it's just for me, it was more that there was so much fuss about it and so much stuff happening metatextually so early that what was actually textually in the show got muddled in with the metatextual stuff that I feel like made it all confusing for me anyway. Like that I wasn't really able to analyze properly what was happening on the show in the text because of how much metatextual stuff there was and how rightly upset everybody was about it. Sherlock's also a mess as far as
oh, absolutely,
where characters are being placed, and so there's loads of stuff that feels just really incidental, and it's like I was never entirely sure what they were trying to say with a whole bunch of it. There's absolutely issues. There are absolutely queer baiting issues around Sherlock, but I'm just I don't know. Kind of hesitant, I guess, to say. I think as far as queer baiting is concerned, there's a sense, I think, that you have an expectation that there's going to be explicit content, right?
Right.
And I never felt as a viewer that I had any anticipation of there being actual content. That's not a good thing. That doesn't make me feel good about the show, but I don't feel like that my expectations were subverted. Does that make sense? That's not, it's not a good thing about representation in the show, and it doesn't let them off the hook in any way. But I felt that it was quite clear that they were making some jokes in poor taste rather than trying to suggest that there was going to be actual canon representation later on. Does that?
Let me see if I can rephrase that. So you're not disagreeing that there may or may not be a subtext in there. It's that you knew, based on all the stuff that you noticed, that there was going to be no payoff. So therefore, you dismissed any subtext that may or may not have been there.
You kind of didn't expect it.
What we were dealing with in the show so clearly, so textually, was that Sherlock Holmes' character was kind of incapable of having a intense emotional relationship with anyone or anything. And obviously, we were arcing him to a place where that wasn't necessarily so much the case anymore. But I just, from watching the first 10 minutes of the first episode, I could not have told you how they could possibly have arced him to a point where having actual sexual identity representation other than asexuality, I guess, from Sherlock would have been believable, possible, It seemed quite clear to me that was more the direction they were going in with him than any relationship between he and John that could be considered canonically romantic in any way.
I feel like, because I've literally just, because it's on Netflix, and again I was tidying my bedroom, I've just watched the first 2 episodes of Sherlock again, and I think The Lady in Pink is the 2nd episode, or might even be the actual very first episode.
The study in pink is the first episode.
It is the very first episode. Okay. Literally, that episode has the scene where they go to the cafe to wait for the cab driver, and the owner of the cafe brings a candle for their romantic date, and they have the conversation that is about Watson asking whether, do do you, and he's, it's awkward as all hell, but they do have the conversation. And I feel this show made it so clear that Sherlock, not even, they didn't go down an actual, I felt, asexual route. It was literally just, it was a concept that didn't even cross his mind. It wasn't something that he could possibly be interested in or show interest in. But then they didn't stick with that, and I feel that's where a lot of the issue happened, because that's literally the first episode. It's like 30 minutes into the first episode, and I feel they kind of drew their lines in the sand really clearly, and then it all went out the window afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless...
I know the scene you're...
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I know the scene exactly that you're talking about, and I don't feel that it was clearly as drawn as what you say. Again, there's room for all interpretations. By no means am I trying to say that this is the only interpretation.
Yeah, no, of course.
But yeah, he reacted strongly against being suggesting that he had a girlfriend, but then whenever they suggested he had a boyfriend, he's like, "Is that a problem?"
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think you're then kind of running into like trying to be really positive and ride on and making him a good guy, and therefore actually making him wishy-washy, and that's really unhelpful in that moment.
Right. I mean, it leads to a lot of people saying, "Oh, that he was obviously acting." Some people's interpretation was he was obviously acting, defensive in that moment rather than.
Whereas, he just said no to a girlfriend without any problems. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think with Sherlock Holmes, you're also, as we were just discussing earlier, you're also playing with, like, it's not like there's not queer subtext in the Arthur Conan Doyle stories. You know what I mean? It's like that's absolutely there. So that's part of the kind of interpretation that people are bringing to the character before you've done anything with him.
Just quickly, Juniper saying, I totally see how the hype got played up by the meta stuff, but there was a ton of actual textual stuff in the show. And then when I saw the show, I wasn't sure that there wasn't going to be queer payoff. From what I saw in the show, I really thought that they might actually go there. And I think then in reaction to us talking just now, they really set it up perfectly for the two of them to have some kind of queer platonic relationship, with Sherlock being asexual. Being queer and asexual, I saw my own experience in the show for sure. So it's not surprising that other people would read it differently, but from my perspective, it was so blatant.
Yeah, though I guess that's maybe part of where I struggle a little bit in terms of how for you, Juniper, that representation, if it had been done well, and obviously there's textuality, there's somebody saying this is what this is what we are, this is who I am, absolutely. But like, I'm not sure, with the exception of the fact that John is eventually in a romantic heterosexual relationship, I'm not sure what a platonic queer relationship would look like on television that was so fundamentally a plot-driven show. Like, you don't spend a huge amount of time with Sherlock and Watson at home on downtime where
I'm back now. I don't know what happened.
I think we're back. It's all gone horribly wrong. Ruth's just run upstairs. Basically, we're hotspotting from the mobile phone, and her mobile phone's just died, which is why our internet went away. She's just run upstairs to grab the portable charger, so we can hopefully. It's all going really well. We're doing great.
Awesome. It's perfect. Make a comment. Somebody, I didn't see who it was. They went by really quickly. Was commenting on Hannibal. I've seen bits and pieces of Hannibal, the representation with Hannibal and Will. I know it gets explicitly queer later on, but first of all, horrors, explicit horror is not really my genre. So I found it really hard to watch the show in
I
general.
have seen none of Hannibal, just to say.
But it does get pretty explicitly queer in the later episodes, and some rather interesting scenes. So I enjoyed the representation, but at the same time, they were both evil.
Yeah. I watched the first
I
season
mean,
of Hannibal, and I just kind of got a little bit distracted by all the murder and stuff, I guess. It was kind of like everything was just so icky and horrid and scary, and everybody was making such unhealthy decisions about everything. And it just kind of felt a little bit like, I just think you should all stop. just stop. Whatever it is you're doing, just put it down and walk away. And yeah, so I find it quite difficult, and because I only watched the first season, and I know things got a little bit more textual later on. So
it's not that I have a problem with the gore or anything like that. It's that I don't get excited by the shock content in a lot of horror movies.
Yep.
So because I don't get excited and lured in by the shock content, the plot line has to be able to support it. And again, all I saw was a bunch of people making bad decisions because I wasn't excited by the shock content. So, but hey, if you loved it, I don't know who you were that said that you liked it.
I think it was Mark Allen.
Okay.
Who asked about Hannibal.
your stomach is braver than mine for watching through.
And Katie, I think as well. Katie is 4 episodes away from the end.
Well, let us know how it turns out, I guess. I don't know.
Probably not well for
Probably not
anyone.
for anyone.
I've not seen
Yeah.
a single minute of the show, but I'm assuming not well for anyone.
Also, Gina Torres died, and that was just super depressing. I love Gina Torres the most.
Yeah.
So Juniper says a queer platonic relationship between them wouldn't be any different to their romantic relationship in the show. They showed some of those. All I'm saying is they set it up for that, but didn't pay off, even though they left that option open-ended at the end. Yeah, I mean, like, totally. I guess one of my struggles is that I can't quite work out what that would have looked like on television as far as like representation on television is concerned. But they didn't play fair with their audience, and I think that's the sort of bottom line, is that irregardless of the interpretation, they didn't play fair with their audience, and they didn't play fair with their characters, and that's not cool.
Absolutely.
And the show just became an absolute mess with, in regards to literally everything about it.
Yeah, season 4 we were talking about jumping the shark, but this was like, jumping the shark with like a jetpack.
It was so depressing. It was so depressing because they had so many people doing such good work in that show. Everything about it was so, from a production standpoint, it was just so classy. It looked good, and all of these actors they got in were, brilliant, and people who knew how to write scripts and all of that stuff. It's just...
I think also, it just for so much of it fooled you into thinking it was the best show that had ever been on television.
Yeah. Was part of not playing fair with the audience, right?
Like, it took me forever to realise that it was awful.
It's that the dialogue is really good, and then the plot is nonsense garbage.
Mm-hmm.
It's this thing that, like, you kind of get fooled into thinking it's like, oh, it's really brilliantly written. It's like, oh, except, like, yeah, okay, line for line. Sure, there's good lines, but the plot is nonsense mess, and that's, yeah.
And I think that's what you get when you have great actors with a mediocre script. Is they can take the individual lines and make them great, but they can't fix the overall plot line.
Yeah, no, they can't.
Abby, oh, you still there, Steph?
Yes, I am.
Oh God.
Sorry, it looked like your sound had gone away and I wasn't sure. Abby says, a character that I like is Thea from Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, who is a trans man, and I thought how they dealt with it and how others in the school acted was well done. It wasn't, even though it wasn't all perfect.
I have issues with Sabrina and Sabrina's relationship with representation generally. I think one of the problems that we're getting into at the moment with television is that representation is becoming a thing which people feel like they have to include from like in order to be considered a right thinking television show kind of perspective.
Yeah.
They're not investing as much time as they should in actually making that part of the landscape of their show, right? Is that if you're doing a television show, the first thing that is the thing that is most important is that you are telling a story that is the story that you want to tell, and that you've got the characters in place who are going to help you tell that story. And from in an ideal world, we want those characters to be as diverse as all of us are, and to be well integrated into their context and into the fabric of the universe that your story is taking place in. I felt a lot of the time with Sabrina that they were superimposing representation onto a story that they had not integrated it into. And I felt like less with Theo because it was such a personal character story. So I think they did some quite nice stuff with him, and the actor was amazing. But like my number one thing about Sabrina, the thing that made me turn Sabrina off and not continue watching, was the fact that in an episode where they lynched female witches from a tree, one of whom was a woman of colour, they said nothing about that. That they made no comment, either subtextually or textually in the show about that. That was just not something that they had thought about, that they had not thought about the visual storytelling that they were doing with that as part of the story as a whole. And that just makes me think that you don't care about this stuff. This is stuff that you're superimposing onto the story that you want to tell because you feel like you should, rather than because you have loyalty and integrity as far as these individual characters and these stories are concerned.
Well, because you thought it through.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that really explains the idea of tokenism versus actual inclusivity with your diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Juniper's saying it wouldn't have looked any different, the relationship, than any other relationship, to be honest. But if you can't see it, you may not understand what that kind of relationship looks like in general, and that's okay. But that's why we need that kind of rep on TV. People can't even comprehend it as an option.
Absolutely.
And that, 100%.
Absolutely. It's, it's why like representation is important generally. It's like because storytelling enables us to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And whether that's somebody who is of a different race than yourself, or a different sexual identity than yourself, or from 500 years ago, or who lives in space, it really shouldn't make a difference as far as the storytelling is concerned. You will have to play the integrity of that character and their life and try and get your audience to walk a mile in their shoes. That's, it's sort of as simple as that.
Well, and certainly, I mean, it's something like I grew up in Switzerland. I grew up in a middle-class white family. I grew up in a very conservative, teeny tiny little village. And like, I didn't meet a black person until I was 16. And the first black person I remember seeing on television was Michelle's boyfriend on Full House. 8-year-old child that was 6-year-old child, God knows, but and he was cute because he was a small child.
Yeah.
It didn't really mean anything, and you didn't really discuss anything, and insane. And I feel that, now, 20 years later, I'm still playing catch up, and I'm having to work really hard to try and make up for literally just the lack of exposure that I had growing up. And television is a huge thing for that. And it's something that, there's an awful lot of very, very young people that were watching Shadowhunters at the same time as we were watching Shadowhunters. And it just kind of made me think, wow, that is such a different way to grow up. And it's by no means perfect, but imagine if that had been on television when we were younger.
Well, like diversity specifically with race that you're talking about. I live in the middle of Missouri. There's not a whole lot of people of color in this area. And even though now things have come up that have made it a little bit issues. But my father, watching the Cosby Show, that was his first real ability to see a not a not bad interpretation of a black family.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Nope. Same. Actually. Yeah. Cosby Show. And I think that might have been it. So I'm desperately trying to remember, but maybe there literally wasn't anything else.
Apparently, Katie is not very far from me.
Katie friend.
We could potentially, meet for coffee or something.
I don't know where any of these things are, other than in America.
Well, it turns out we're like 20, 25 miles away from each other.
Oh, that's nothing. You can walk that.
Yeah.
On a really good day.
Yeah, exactly. After the COVID, yeah.
Yes, no, you can't walk that now. You can't go anywhere right now.
Which you guys have sent me a couple of goodie packages. I'm working on sending one to you, and I've got some Shadowhunter material, so that you can make some masks out of it. So.
So excited.
You'll enjoy that.
I will enjoy that. Our laundry line, not this laundry line. This laundry line is just real close. Our small laundry rack at the moment is 90% of the time just face masks. That's our life now.
Yeah. Crazy world we're living in.
Abby says, I live at the very top of Wales, and when I was in school, there were 2 children of colour in my whole school. There was about 1,000 people in my school. I genuinely...
Bye, Katie.
Bye, Katie. I'm trying to go through all of my school years, and I think I am correct in saying that I did not go to school with a single person of color at any point. You had a different experience.
I did have a different experience. Yeah. I grew up in East London, which is hugely majority Bangladeshi, and my school was 95% Muslim, 90% Bangladeshi. I was one of 2 white kids in my class. It's just, very, very different experience.
Juniper says, in my high school, there were 2 people who weren't white, and they were both adopted from Korea. Yeah.
At my high school, there were 2 black kids, one the year after me and one in my year. But one of them was the one in my year was on the cheerleading squad, so we didn't really hang out with each other because I was kind of the geeky librarian kid. Um, so, but when it came to
People.
exactly, so when it came to doing there's a board in the front, and we would like for the months or holidays or whatever, we would design it. And one time it came up for Black History Month, and both of those kids refused to do it because they didn't want to be singled out, or
Sure.
so I volunteered to do it, and in the process I sought out one of the last remaining members of the Buffalo Soldiers. Are you familiar with them?
No.
Okay, the Buffalo Soldiers was started as the all black regiment in the Civil War. So
Okay.
they were cavalry soldiers. Now they didn't get disbanded until like the 1960s. Um, so there was still a couple of people that were in the Buffalo Soldiers that were still alive in the 90s. And we invited one of them to come speak at our school during that presentation. And he had a conversation with me afterwards and really expressed gratitude for me, inviting him into a place like this where there wasn't representation, and kind of started my. I wish I remembered his name, but he kind of started my idea of pulling in representation everywhere I can.
Yeah.
He signed a little Buffalo Soldier picture for me, and it's with my my high school stuff.
Nice.
So I was from Lakota. I want to say there's a couple of things my country's doing right now. We gave back half of the state of Oklahoma to the Native Americans. So I
Okay.
think that was a ridiculous amount of land that slowly the white people have stolen from Native Americans
Yeah.
through subterfuge or through legal loopholes and stuff like that.
Of
And
course.
the Supreme Court just backed out all of those other rulings and gave the land back to them. So
And the
yay.
thing that's really sad is that certainly I had not seen that, because that did not make headline news. And yeah.
I'll post a link to that too. It's really
Oh,
cool
Yeah,
reading.
absolutely, yeah. We'll share all of that stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of comments about people who had similar experiences, either of having very, very few people of color, or being one of very few people of color in their schools. And Tiva Jelly saying, until we moved to the US, black people only lived in books, not even on TV. Which actually, I can't even remember. This is the other thing about growing up in Switzerland, something that, we had quite a lot of really quite distressing wake-up calls in regards to, like, the level of whitewashing, I suppose. Is the fact the first time I heard Rove sing Under the Sea while cooking food, because that's something that she does, I asked her why she was doing it in a
awful
really,
Jamaican accent, not something that
really quite
I would do in
dubious
public.
and possibly really quite problematic Jamaican accents. And she looked at me like I was insane, because Sebastian is a Jamaican crustacean. And that blew my mind, because in the German dub, he's just really posh.
Okay.
And, Simba, voiced by the dude who does Leonardo DiCaprio's voiceover.
Oh, okay.
Like, that level of and like, that's not something that ever occurs to you until literally you have moments like this where it's like, why are you being weird about singing the song with a weird accent? It's like, oh, that's what it sounds like. Oh, okay. It didn't do that in German. And you wouldn't do that on German television. And that was a head trip as well. Abby says, American school confuses me. I just don't understand them. We don't have cheerleaders. My school, and I just don't get how the years work. I feel that way about American schools and British schools.
I don't understand the concept of boarding schools, but then that's, you know.
I didn't go to boarding school.
No, but you people made them.
Okay.
They're very British.
Well, I think the sort of Johnny Hockey Sticks, Mallory Towers kind of thing is very British. I'm not sure the actual concept of boarding school is particularly unique to Britain.
Fair enough. Now, I think we should probably be thinking about calling an end to this, though I have had a very good time and I feel that there's billions more things to talk about. But we have been here for nearly 2 hours.
Wow, we sure have.
Clearly, Instagram also doesn't do that thing anymore where it gives you a warning, which is why we were just so radically cut off earlier, because it used to give you like a 3-minute warning at least, I think. Whereas now it just goes, go away, we hate you. And I'm kind of worried that that's going to happen again. Is there any other kind of TV show or any other thing that you wanted to talk about, Steph?
Very briefly, after that Comic-Con panel, I did watch a little bit of 911 Lone Star with the that character, and I watched specifically how that character in the panel he talks about going to his writers and saying, this is really not what I would say in this situation. I wouldn't approach it like, you know, I have a horrible secret. I would propose it like, you know, there's something personal about me I haven't told you yet because we haven't made it to that point in our relationship.
Which was a beautiful moment in the panel. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just something that, you know, a non-queer actor wouldn't know to do. They would trust the dialogue that they've been given. But so I watched the episode and I really loved how that episode went. I mean, it was devastating and sad for that particular character. But it went in a very satisfying, true to life way. The plot. I'm not sure if I'm coming across exactly how I want to,
totally.
But yeah.
That's great. It's on our list. We didn't get to watch it before having this chat, but
mostly because I couldn't see it on any of the like standard streaming services that we have. Obviously in America it's different, but where did you watch it? What? So
I'm trying to remember. I remember having to dig for it, and I finally found it. So I'll see if I can dig it back up and find it for you. Well,
Juniper says, did we talk about Sense8? We have not talked about Sense8 yet.
I mentioned it in passing. No, Sense8's a really interesting one. Sense8's a really interesting one because obviously from a representation standpoint, they kind of bust the mold.
Take a lot of boxes.
A lot of ways. I really struggle because I didn't like Sense8 very much. Kind of as a show, it didn't work for me super well. So I've watched all of it, but I don't like from a representation standpoint. It's largely great, but like I struggle with it just because it didn't.
As an actual show, it
didn't work for me very well as an actual show. I felt like they lost confidence in what was an interesting premise, and it all got a little bit like explosion-y and CIA dark cars stuff.
I would have, because I watched it really late. I was very much oh my god, everyone's watching this show, so I'm just gonna have to. And I would have loved them to actually lean into the character aspect of it all. Like, what is this doing to your mindset? How are you dealing with these relationships? How are you dealing with exploring those people that you're now connected to? And can we just press pause on the big gun shooty, car chasey, FBI nonsense? Like, I don't care about that bit. I really want you to go and explore the bit where you suddenly find yourself in India in the middle of a wedding, and like that's.
But also just, and like from a representation sort of standpoint, I feel like they maybe missed out on quite a lot of interesting stuff and dynamic and conversation that they could have had by like over escalating the level of intimacy between the sensate cluster people right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you didn't get very much time where they were like getting to know each other and learning about each other and knowing about their differences, because you know obviously you have 8 incredibly different people from different countries, different walks of life, and it felt like because they had so much plot to get through, they kind of like dumped everybody into this space where they were like, oh, we're all kind of on board with this thing and it's fine, and yeah, you're, you know, somebody I've never met before from, you know, Seoul, but that's cool, like, you know, and you know, that's fine. But it did mean that I felt like kind of the most interesting bit of the show was something that they sort of fast forwarded through or skipped entirely, and then were more focused on CIA.
Absolutely. I loved the moments when he was trying to hotwire the door and all of a sudden he could, and how how his friends were like, how did you learn how to do that? And he was like, I don't remember the excuse that he made, but he's just kind of passed it. And and then when the guy in Africa, he gets in that fist fight, and then the girl that knows Taekwondo or whatever, comes in and helps defend him against the mob, and
all of that
I
really
loved those moments.
Yeah.
Literally, I could have watched seasons and seasons of that, whereas I just didn't care about the action movie part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt very similar about, we watched
The Old Guard.
The Old Guard, thank you.
Yeah.
Just the weekend just gone. And I kind of feel exactly the same about that as I do about Sense8. Like, I can absolutely see how the fandom and the fan fiction for this is going to be astonishing. But the actual thing that you're showing me on screen didn't do what I wanted it to do.
Yeah. It looks like you can get to Reno or 911. I don't know why I said Reno. 911 Lone Star on Hulu. Do you have Hulu?
We don't know, but maybe next time we're in the States.
Yes.
But yeah,
and good to know for anyone listening that is in the States. Hulu.
yeah, indeed.
I don't know, Junior, but I don't know, how did you feel about Sense8?
Me?
No, Juniper. Sorry, because she was asking about Sense8. I mean, obviously you also, but.
I loved the connections. I loved Leto. I loved I can't remember Leto's partner's name. And I loved the moments whenever the straight cop was talking about being in the headspace with Leto and his partner, and understanding more than he used to understand about connection. So I loved those moments.
Totally.
I totally agree with the what story are you telling? Is this a character story or is this a plot story? You can't really do both well.
Not unless you've got a bunch more time than they clearly did. Like,
right.
If you've got, like 22 episodes to do it in, then sure, okay. But like, you didn't have that time, and it seems like you're focused off.
And he just, I just think you cut the wrong thing. You truncated the wrong thing. Juniper says, I loved Sense8. I'm with you on wishing that there was more character content and less plot, but I still loved it. Which, I think that's kind of the bottom line, is that you were doing so many amazing things. And I just wish that you had
focused. Yeah.
Well, and had faith in what you were doing, because what you were doing was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't need to make it shooty bangy.
Yeah. And I do feel like, at least in contrast, The Old Guard did set out to be an action flick.
Yes,
which,
totally. Like I don't
never
feel betrayed by The Old Guard.
Right. It's like it never said it was anything other than an action flick with this weird additional conceit of the immortality thing. Like that was what it set out to do. And the fact that I find long endless action sequences a little bit tedious is not really their problem.
Yeah, no, but the old guard is absolutely was not the fault of the old guard. It was the kind of seeing all of Twitter explode about what basically I then realized was going to be the fandom of it all rather than the actual content in the movie.
It's the
of
10-15 minutes of character development you
that
get
you can then,
so that you care when people get shot in the head. But like,
but it was 10-15 minutes.
Minutes. Like, well, that was a really good 10-15 minutes, but the rest of the movie, guns blowing up, sure, whatever.
Abby's asking where she can watch Sense8, and I believe it's
The
on Netflix,
yes,
in
Netflix
the UK.
Original.
In the UK and Wales. Abby also loves my tattoos. Thank you.
Exceptional taste.
Any
Something
other shows that we want to discuss?
Sorry.
Oh, I haven't had a chance to watch it, but I've heard really good things about Killing Eve. Has anybody else watched it?
We have not seen it, but again, yeah, we have been told to watch it a lot.
So that was the next on my list. That might be a point.
Oh, this was a question that we got yesterday actually as well, saying this might be a point a bit more for Ruth, as I'm not sure how far Enid Blyton went globally, but George from the Famous Five is a bit of a question mark. Would she fit into the LGBTQ plus? And I have never read the Famous Five novels.
As far as interpretation goes, yes, absolutely. As far as Enid Blyton's intention is concerned, no, absolutely not. Enid Blyton was not a very progressive politically human being. I think George is a really interesting character, and I think you do encounter complication with female characters who are either seeking very masculine roles or playing very masculine roles in stories written in a time before 1975, and because there were a lot of reasons to aspire to masculinity that had absolutely nothing to do with gender identity, because being a woman in 1910 fundamentally sucked quite a lot. So I think there is sort of like fuzziness around, like, she wanted to be a boy because she wanted to have the freedoms that the young men around her did.
Okay.
But equally, there's certainly plenty of text that supports reading George as a trans character.
But you don't feel that that's what Enid Blyton
Well,
meant.
that's definitely not what Enid Blyton intended, because Enid Blyton was a conservative, not nice person, with seriously dodgy gender politics. But I think, I think absolutely, as far as you can read George that way, absolutely.
She's the one killing Eve.
Lots of Killing Eve love.
But sorry, we will do better. We will watch it.
What about Gentleman Jack on HBO?
I haven't watched that one either. You're rubbish. I'm sorry.
I don't even know that.
What's that? Tell us.
Gentleman Jack is a historical interpretation. I can't remember her name, of a real character who was a woman who seduced other women in. I'm trying to remember the time period. I think it was early 1800s.
Okay.
She's a really famous English historical figure.
Go. Name them, Ruth. Name all of them alphabetically.
Anne Lister.
All right. Okay.
It's the story is based on all of her journals. that
Okay.
that survived. So I watched season 1. It was very interesting. And I kind of, with so little representation, it's hard to watch the nuanced individual characters. Like, an individual character can have any amount of personal interpretation and personal issues that won't necessarily be representing the entire population of lesbians. But when you only have one person or a very small set of representation, they really do have to embody a more, middle of the road political views and whatnot. Gentleman Jack, she's very political in not wanting women to have the right to vote. So it was very, interesting to see that point of view. And again, it's the time period she was raised in, and a lot of other things, but she dresses very masculine. She's referred to very masculinely, and she, courts a lot of women. So she actually proposes marriage to this one female in the show, which is at the end of season 1. I don't know if they had season 2. Season 1 ended July of 2019, so
maybe not yet.
Okay, yeah. So
Given the
another thing that's stuck somewhere in a COVID vault.
Yeah, exactly.
And may hopefully get finished. I mean, that was actually the astonishing thing about the forgot again, the old guard, the last guard, the old guard, that they basically kind of, like, what sounds like kind of, January, February, went, well, this is going to go horribly wrong, and just got everything and send it to people's houses.
Yeah.
And send them all of the equipment they needed to actually finish this bloody thing. They seem to have been very on the ball, which is, it's also heavily female team. So of course they're very on the ball. But that's pretty impressive, as opposed to like the number of people that are just like, well, this is gonna come out at some point when we can leave our houses again and do stuff because we need to do post-production. It's like, but surely you do post-production on a computer anyway.
I mean, probably a slightly more elaborate computer setup than most people have in their houses.
They did it. The old guard did it.
Okay, yeah.
They did all of the voiceovers and all of the special effects on the wounds healing and all that from like their bedrooms.
Pretty snazzy.
They're very cool.
I think quite clearly though the old guard was a slightly shoestringy type production from the off, so maybe it was a little bit more easily mobilized.
Just I was very impressed by the behind the scenes of that.
Yeah.
More than I was by the movie. It's like their production team sounds amazing. Their work ethic sounds amazing. The fandom, I'm sure, is going to be astonishing. The movie, had quite a nice couple of hours. It was okay.
I know you guys, or at least Ruth, you chimed in that you didn't particularly like it, but Yuri on Ice was a very nice representation in the mainstream anime.
Yeah, we've just finished releasing a series on Yuri on Ice. I'm very fond of Yuri on Ice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Neither of us are massive on anime.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we kind of
Maybe that's what it is.
We are not anime people. We don't know, and we must make it very clear that we are not in any way speaking from any knowledge of anime.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, no,
So
enjoyed Yuri on Ice very much. Yeah. For further thoughts, see our 5-episode podcast
Okay.
on the subject. But yeah,
I'm a bit behind, so
yeah, no.
now
That's
that I'm commuting, I don't have the spot to listen to my podcast.
I know, same. I got my list of, the podcast app on my phone is just piling up because I don't commute anymore, and it's just miserable. So like, I will at some point start doing work in a normal, leaving the house sort of way again, and then I will catch up on 17,000 hours of podcasts.
Absolutely.
Bye, Mark Allen.
Thank you for joining us.
I hope everything's okay. The phone call from Mum during a pandemic. I hope everything's fine. I hope so. So we should
Cool.
also. We should,
To wrap it up, I'd like to talk about the Visible on Television Apple TV podcast. I don't know if you guys have Apple on TV as well.
We used to have an Apple box and then it broke. So not
Oh,
at the moment.
okay.
it's dead.
But out on Visible Out on Television is a series Wilson Cruz talks about a lot, and of course I stan him, so I know about it. But I watched it. It's really cool. It goes through television of all sorts, from like the earliest moments of representation, the Jeffersons, like
Okay.
the
cartoon.
up to no, not the Jeffersons, the cartoon. The black family in like the 50s or 60s, 70s,
Okay.
maybe 70s. And they had a trans character on.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was just one episode. And then we've had Eight is Enough. There was one friend of the dad who came out as gay. Again, one episode in like an 8-season run. But then it just talks about all of the representation. Talks about the Hays Code, and it talks about the AIDS epidemic and how that shifted. We were starting to get a lot of representation, and then AIDS happened, and then there was this conservative shift in the country that went back to, and then we had to dig our way out of that through the 90s and early 2000s. So, really good documentary series to watch. Do what?
And that's called Visible on Television, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, we shall make sure that we chuck all of the links that we've talked about. We're going to have to watch this back and check about all of the things that we promised to put on the Twitter and the Tumblr, but we're going to make sure to do that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Steph.
Yeah, it was
No
super-
problem. Thank you for having me on. It was a blast.
That was really good fun, and yeah, I feel like we've got covered like 10% of a
Of all the stuff that's out
ginormous
there.
world.
Yeah.
But I hope that was good for people listening as well.
Cool.
Oh no, Elle's just joined. I'm sorry, Elle, we're literally leaving this minute. We're so sorry. It always happens. People joining 30 seconds before the whole thing cuts off because we've overrun on time. But we are gonna head off. We're gonna have dinner. And we hope, Steph, that you have a fantastic rest of the day.
Yeah.
Because it is much earlier in life for you.
Yes. I'm going to go have lunch, which is a little bit late now, but that's okay.
Enjoy your lunch.
I will.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It was
you.
lovely
Take care.
speaking to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.